She found him frozen in silence, sitting on a bench of frost that hadn't felt warmth in days. His coat was threadbare, too thin for winter, clinging to him like a story no one cared to read. People passed by, hurrying past pain they didn't want to see. But she stopped. She knelt without a word, placing a small bag of bread in his hands, still warm from her kitchen. She didn't ask for his name. She didn't ask for his past. She only saw someone cold and gave him warmth. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the man beneath the snow-dusted coat wasn't just another forgotten soul. He was someone the world once celebrated, and he had chosen to disappear. The frost around him. It wasn't just weather, it was society's neglect. The bread she offered, it was something the world rarely gives, pure, quiet humanity. And that bench? It would soon become the stage where worth, wealth, and truth would all be redefined. Tell us where you're watching from, because this story isn't just about a kind act. It's about what happens when compassion meets a secret legacy. Maya Brooks was the kind of woman who saw dignity in every face, even when the world didn't. At 24, she worked long hours as a barista in the morning and spent her evenings as a caregiver at a local shelter, wiping brows and telling stories to those the city had forgotten. She didn't have much: an aging coat, student loans, and a tiny apartment with a heater that rattled louder than it warmed. But she carried something rare: the belief that kindness was the only luxury no one could steal from you. Every evening, on her walk home, Maya passed through a small park nestled between downtown's gleaming offices and the older neighborhoods too humble to be noticed. And every night, she saw him. A man draped in a weathered coat, always in the same spot on the same bench. He never begged, never looked up. He simply sat, quiet, composed, a ghost wrapped in frost. That man was Darius Cole, though no one called him that anymore. At 38, he had once been the darling of the tech world, a self-made millionaire who disappeared without explanation after a scandal engulfed his company. While others fled to islands or private estates, Darius stayed behind, hiding in plain sight. He no longer trusted headlines or boardrooms. He wanted to see how people treated someone who had nothing to offer. His coat was no longer a garment. It was a fortress of secrets, stitched with silence and humility. The city around them buzzed with neon light and cold indifference. The snow crept into corners like forgotten promises. Yet every time Maya placed a warm bag of bread in his hands, the frost didn't feel as cruel. Her scarf, fraying at the ends, carried his breath for a moment as he leaned toward its warmth. She didn't ask why he was there. He didn't explain. But in that quiet, a story began. One not of charity or pity, but of quiet redemption and shared humanity. Maya had always seen something different in him, something the snow couldn't bury and the silence couldn't hide. The way he sat, never slouched, always composed. The words he used when he did speak, measured, thoughtful, like someone who once had rooms full of people listening. She noticed how, even in the bitter cold, he would flip through worn pages of books others would have thrown away. Not just novels, but philosophy, economics, things that didn't match the rest of his weathered life. Something about him didn't fit the sidewalk. It felt borrowed, like a man in exile from another world. One night, after a brutal drop in temperature, Maya paused longer than usual. She crouched beside him, brushing frost off his shoulder. "There's room at the shelter tonight," she whispered. You don't have to freeze out here." He gave the same gentle smile he always did, eyes calm and distant. "Thank you, Maya," he said quietly, "but I'm exactly where I need to be." It puzzled her. It frustrated her. Yet, something about the conviction in his voice kept her from pushing further. But that following night, everything changed. The bench was the same. The snow was heavier, but his coat, his armor, was gone. He sat hunched in a threadbare shirt, trembling, his breath shallow against the frost. Maya dropped her bag, tore off her own coat, and knelt beside him. "You'll freeze like this," she said, trying to wrap him in warmth. As she reached to pull the sleeves over his arms, he gently caught her hand. Not forceful, just still. His eyes met hers, tired but clear. And that's when she noticed the wallet. It was wedged beneath the bench, half buried in snow. She pulled it free, thinking it might belong to someone else. But when she opened it, her hands froze. Not from the cold, but from the truth. A weathered photo ID. Darius Cole, the same name, that once flashed across financial news networks and tech summits. The man who disappeared after his billion-dollar company imploded. The man the world assumed was hiding behind gates or in exile overseas. But he wasn't. He was here, on this bench, with bread in his lap and her coat around his shoulders. She looked up, stunned, her voice caught between breath and disbelief. "You're Darius Cole?" He nodded slowly. "Now you know," he whispered. The wind around them hushed like it too was holding its breath. And in that stillness, Maya realized she had been feeding a man not forgotten by fate, but choosing to be forgotten by the world. Maya sat frozen on the snow-dusted bench, her breath visible in the cold air, but her thoughts racing far faster than the wind. Darius, if that was even real, watched her closely, not with the gaze of a millionaire, but with the tired eyes of a man who had lived too long in silence. She finally found her voice, gentle but trembling. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you choose this, to live like this?" Her words weren't accusing, just aching for answers. Darius looked away toward the empty street glowing orange under a flickering lamppost. "After my board betrayed me, the company I built was stripped away piece by piece. I wasn't ruined, financially. Not really. But something inside me cracked. I didn't want to run away in luxury. I wanted to see what it meant to be nothing, to have no title, no power. I wanted to see who still looked me in the eye when I had nothing to give." His voice was even, but there was a rawness beneath it. A quiet mourning for years lost in boardrooms, for trust squandered behind polished smiles. Maya swallowed hard, her eyes glossy. "You've been sitting here, every night, just waiting?" He nodded slowly. "Watching, learning. Money made people speak. But silence." He turned to face her. "Silence taught me who mattered." His fingers tugged at the sleeves of her coat still wrapped around him. "And you, Maya. You never asked who I was. You didn't offer kindness to get something. You just gave it like it cost you nothing, when I know you don't have much to give." She looked down, a tear finally slipping free. Not because of the reveal, not because he was Darius Cole, the man the business world still whispered about, but because through it all, she could finally see it. The loneliness he had, worn like a second coat, the layers of betrayal that no wealth could insulate him from. "I wasn't helping a millionaire," she whispered. "I was helping a man who looked cold and alone. That's all." He smiled then, a small, cracked thing that somehow thawed the air between them. "And that," he said, reaching into his pocket, "is why I want you beside me now." From beneath the ragged folds of his coat he pulled out a small envelope. Inside it, a business card, sleek, black, and engraved in silver. Darius Cole, founder, Virum Labs. He handed it to her. "It's a new venture about transparency, about rebuilding trust in tech, in people. We need someone with a compass, like yours, someone real." Maya stared at the card, then back at the man before her. Still the same frostbitten figure from the bench. Still the man she'd brought bread to with numb fingers and soft words. But now, standing taller, straighter, reclaiming something. Not just his identity, but his voice. She took the card, hand trembling again, but this time not with the weight of someone else's wallet or reputation, with hope. "You're sure?" she asked quietly. He nodded once. "This time, let me offer you something." He gestured gently to the bench. "You fed me every night when I was empty. Let me return the first piece of what I owe." And as the snow fell once more, soft and slow, the man who had chosen silence rose, while the woman who had never expected anything now held the key to something greater than she had ever imagined. The days that followed were a blur of quiet. Meetings, long walks, and whispered plans between two people who had once met in silence. Maya, who had spent years passing out kindness in brown paper bags, now found herself sitting across from Darius Cole. Not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as a partner in something far bigger than she'd ever imagined. He brought her into the heart of his newest vision, a foundation not built on sleek presentations or hollow promises, but on truth. Real, tangible truth born from park benches, forgotten people, and small acts of humanity. "This isn't just another nonprofit," Darius told her one morning, his tone steady but filled with something new, conviction. "This is a redesign of dignity, a system built by people who have seen both sides, and that's why I need you." He offered her a role as co-architect in building the foundation's human-centered programs, housing that respected privacy, shelters that restored pride, and resources that met people where they were instead of forcing them to perform worthiness. And, at the center of it all, the logo, a simple sketch of a hand offering a piece of bread. Maya stared at it in awe the first time he showed her. "That's the bread I gave you," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "You offered it without knowing who I was, without knowing who you were becoming. That moment changed everything." He revealed something else too, something he'd never told the press. Before his disappearance, he had quietly donated millions to shelters and food programs, never attaching his name. But it was always distant, he confessed. Charity from a pedestal. Now, I don't want distance. I want understanding. And you bring that. Maya sat still, the weight of everything pressing gently around her heart. The cold bench. The quiet gratitude. The nights she came home with frostbitten fingers but a warm soul. It hadn't just been food. It had been dignity, shared in the simplest form. And now, that simple act was becoming a symbol. Bread, basic and sacred, stood for more than hunger. It stood for kindness, for connection, for the courage to see someone clearly. Snow, the cold, They once endured, now symbolized the barrier she had melted. And that bench, once a place where a man hid from the world, had become a meeting point of fate, a sacred crossroad. On one of their final private walks before the Foundation's public launch, Darius paused by that same bench, glancing out over the now thawed park. He turned to her, voice low but unwavering. "You didn't rescue me," he said. "You reminded me I wasn't gone." Maya's throat tightened. She couldn't speak, only smile, because in that moment they both understood. What had begun as a silent offering in the snow had become something eternal, something honest, something alive. The launch of the Cole Foundation wasn't accompanied by glittering galas or press conference fanfare. It began quietly, in the same park where a silent girl once handed bread to a man wrapped in silence. Maya Brooks, now named, the lead community advisor, didn't wear a blazer to her first official day. She wore her scarf, the same one she had draped over Darius on that bitter night. Her presence was still gentle, still grounded, but something had changed in her eyes. Purpose. Not ambition. Not ego. Just the clear fire of someone who had seen suffering up close and refused to turn away. Darius stood beside her, not as a myth, not as a headline, but as a man who had lived both the heights of wealth and the depths of invisibility. He no longer needed to hide behind frost and unwashed coats. His long wool trench swayed in the winter air, but his hands were not tucked away. They were offering boxes of hot meals sealed with care and dignity. Together, they walked back through the park that had once been a stage of secrets. But this time, they weren't alone. Volunteers lined the path with blankets, thermoses, and gloves. Tents had been replaced with warming stations. And in the very place where Darius once sat frozen in silence, laughter echoed gently, tentative, real. Maya moved through the small crowd with the same rhythm she always had, quiet, steady, sincere. She stopped beside a man huddled on the bench, one they both recognized from weeks past. Kneeling, she offered him a bowl of soup and warm gloves, her hand outstretched in the same gesture that had once changed a life. Darius watched from behind, his breath caught in a moment of pure stillness. She didn't need cameras to capture this. She didn't need applause. She simply served, just as she always had. She once brought him bread, the Foundation's website would later say. Now, together, they serve hope. What began as a chance encounter turned into a movement. Maya helped design programs that asked not what people lacked, but what they needed to reclaim their dignity. Every initiative reflected her lived experience. Shelters that allowed privacy. Career training that respected the pace of healing. Mental health resources that didn't treat pain like paperwork. She became the voice that those often overlooked began to trust. And Darius, he didn't just fund it. He lived it. He sat in meetings beside Maya, not above her. He returned to tech, yes, but with boundaries, building platforms to connect volunteers to those in need, making dignity easier to deliver at scale. In a TV interview that aired months later, the host turned to Maya and asked, "What was it like discovering that the man you helped was a millionaire in disguise?" She smiled gently, not missing a beat. "I didn't help a millionaire," she said. "I helped a man." The interview clip went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. In a world that often demands receipts for kindness, Maya reminded everyone that some of the most powerful acts are given with no expectation, no recognition, only heart. That winter, the foundation fed over 10,000 people. But more than meals, it served something else, proof that humanity still lives in quiet gestures, and that love, when stripped of titles and tested in frost, is what truly remains. And as snow began to fall again, soft, familiar, and silent, Maya and Darius stood side by side beneath the same lamppost where it all began. Not as the barista and the beggar, but as the two people who had reminded each other what it means to be seen. The frost was still there, but now, so was the fire. She never asked for anything in return. No spotlight, no applause, no recognition. But the world returned something bigger than Maya ever imagined. Purpose, trust, and the kind of connection that only comes from acts of unshaken humanity. All she did was stop. All she did was care. And from that one quiet moment, a legacy was born, not built from wealth or titles, but from warmth in winter and bread shared on a bench. Her story isn't rare because it happened. It's rare because she chose compassion when no one was watching. Would you offer help if you knew nothing about who was watching? What does real wealth look like? Kindness or coins? If this story touched your heart, share it. Let it be a reminder that sometimes it's not the money you give, it's the humanity you offer that changes everything. The smallest moments often unlock the greatest transformations. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next story, where love shows up without a name and kindness opens every door.